In their 2 playoff wins this season, the Toronto Raptors fared much better when Fred VanVleet was out injured, leading a lot of Raptors fans to believe that this team is better when Fred VanVleet doesn't play. So in this video, we're going to break down the validity of this statement and determine, are the Raptors actually better without Fred VanVleet? Let's get into it. What's going on, NBA Raptors fans? It's Jacob here, back with Amateur Hour Sports for another Toronto Raptors YouTube video. On Amateur Hour Sports, we give you the greatest coverage and analysis on the latest Toronto Raptors news, and we are going to be doing that all throughout the offseason, so make sure you are subscribed to the channel. We are on a road to 9,000 subscribers, getting so close to that milestone, and you can help me get there. But we want to talk about Fred VanVleet today and the statement and just the buzz going on about a lot of people saying that the Toronto Raptors are actually better without Fred VanVleet. This is coming off the back of a playoff performance where the Raptors ended up losing in 6 games, but games 4 and 5 in which the Toronto Raptors won, Fred VanVleet got injured before halftime in game 4, and he did not feature at all in game 5, and it is pretty safe to say that the Raptors looked better in these games when Fred VanVleet wasn't playing. Now, this is a very small sample size, but I think it was quite telling all throughout the series. The Raptors looked better without Fred on the court. And I think part of this statement is true, but we're going to break down everything regarding the statement, whether it be playoffs, whether it be regular season, and determine whether or not it's true. Fred VanVleet makes this team worse. So for starters, we're going to go to the playoffs, and I think there is a lot of validity behind this statement as it comes to that single playoff series. Raptors played in 6 games, very small sample size, and they definitely looked better in the games where Fred VanVleet did not play. However, you can talk about the game 6 where after halftime we were absolutely abysmal, and we're going to go into that a little bit further. But as it comes to the playoffs, I would say it's safe to say the Raptors look better without Fred VanVleet featuring. Now, it's difficult to say that because I love Fred VanVleet and he's such an important part of this team, but in the playoffs, they look better without him, and there's a number of reasons why that's the case. As it comes to the matchup, Fred VanVleet has fared historically very poorly against the 76ers. This series kind of maintained that, and also we go back to the championship run in 2019, he was just absolutely awful and unusable in that series against the 76ers. And I think a lot of the reason why Fred VanVleet historically struggles against the 76ers is a lot to do with the matchups, and I would say the biggest thing is his size. The 76ers have been a pretty big team over the last few years. That's diminished without Ben Simmons available for them because, they traded him away for James Harden, but I still think the size of that team makes it a bit difficult. And finally, when Fred VanVleet had a good size matchup with Tyrese Maxey, Fred could not handle the quick first step that Maxey possessed, and naturally Maxey kind of demolished us in a lot of the games in this series, especially in those games 1 and 2. A lot of that was because Fred was finding it difficult to find any sort of impact defensively. Offensively, he really wasn't shooting the ball well either to make up for it. He still wasn't getting to the rim because of, all the size in his team, Joel Embiid occupying the paint. So it was difficult for Fred VanVleet to make a mark all throughout the series. However, is that such an indictment against Fred VanVleet? He was clearly dealing with a lot during that series. Fred VanVleet was dealing with knee injuries pretty much all throughout the second half of the season, and it probably got slightly more progressively worse as we kept going through the season, and then it got to his hip flexor being a problem, which actually ruled him out from playing in some of those games. So we have Fred VanVleet in a playoff series against a team he historically struggles against. Everybody has those sort of opponents where they kind of struggle, and I will admit, the best players rise up to those occasions and overcome that. I understand that completely. But also he's got to do that when dealing with bad knee trouble, and he's also then dealing with hip flexor trouble. So all of those things considered, yes, the Raptors in that series operated better without Fred VanVleet, but that was not the actual version of Fred VanVleet that we should expect. That was not the Fred VanVleet. That was not the real Fred VanVleet out there because of all these other factors that I just listed. So let's talk about the regular season. This is where we have the bigger sample size. We get more of an idea of what Fred VanVleet brought to this team. And, in the second half of the season, Fred VanVleet was not as good as the first half. First half of the season, he was incredible. Are we forgetting how good Fred VanVleet was at this point? Fred VanVleet was named an all-star. It wasn't like he was an injury replacement for anybody. Fred VanVleet was legitimately named on an NBA All-Star team. That is incredibly hard to do. There's not a ton of Raptors players throughout their history who have been able to do that. The list is starting to grow 100%, but there is not a massive list of Toronto Raptors who have been All-Stars. And for Fred VanVleet to do that, that is quite an achievement. There are some players who go their entire NBA career without making an All-Star team. Some good players who do that. Obviously, the really, really good ones are going to be in every All-Star game, but for players like Fred VanVleet making around like $21 million a year, those guys aren't making all-star teams that often. So it was an incredible feat for him to get there. And at the start of the season, Fred was honestly carrying this team. Like, he was putting like 30 points per game for good stretches on hyper efficient shooting. Like, he was spectacular. But things definitely changed after the All-Star break, and I think that's where some of these comments may come to be. Fred VanVleet started to dwindle a little bit. Injuries started to pile up, and his shooting started to dry up. And when Fred VanVleet's outside shooting isn't working as well, that gives him a lot less space to operate on the interior. First half of the season, with all that extra space because he was shooting well, he was one of the deadliest mid-range shooters in the NBA, making him so useful to us offensively. Being able to score on 3 different levels, it just made Fred's game come a lot easier to him. That, coupled with some tremendous defense that he was playing, like, he absolutely deserved to be on an all-star team. Things really started to fade off, though, and one of the big reasons for that was Fred was averaging the highest minutes per game in the NBA. And I think a lot of people, like, we had warning signs, and maybe not the signs, but people understood. And I said this on my channel a bunch of times. Like, Fred VanVleet is working super hard out there. He's playing high-level defense and high-level offense, not really getting any breaks. And he's playing upwards of 38 minutes per game. Like, he was up near 40 minutes per game at certain points. There's a big worry that that will catch up to him, and now I'm sitting here in the offseason saying, well, it absolutely caught up to him. You saw what he brought near the end of the regular season. It just wasn't the level that he had earlier in the season. He wasn't moving as well. He didn't have the quick burst that he had earlier on in the season. Like, you could really tell that he wasn't the same player, and I think a lot of that is on playing him so many minutes. But also, one of the big problems is, like, if you didn't play him in those minutes, the Raptors were really bad, especially at the start of the season. Like, Fred VanVleet's net on-court versus off-court rating, like the Raptors rating when he's on versus off the court, he had one of the top 5 in the league for much of the season. Like, his impact was profound, and when he wasn't on the floor, you saw the Raptors crumble. So I understand a little bit why Nick Nurse had to use him so much. I think near the end of the season, we got accustomed to Siakam more running the point when Fred VanVleet wasn't on, or even Scotty Barnes taking a lot of that workload, and that made it a little bit easier for him because, you know, he was dealing with injuries. We had a lot to deal with Fred VanVleet in that regard. But near the start of the season, when Fred VanVleet wasn't on the court, like, we had no choice but to throw him back on. So I understand why Nick Nurse did it. I think more questions could be asked about the roster construction of this team and not having that actual solidified backup point guard. But you could also say you were expecting Malachi Flynn to be able to take that step to get there. And at the start of the season, Delano Banton was taking strides to get into that position. So maybe it's more of a testament to those guys, but a lot of things come together. Maybe Nick Nurse should have been a little more time sensitive with Fred. Maybe Masai Ujiri should have picked up a better backup point guard, maybe done it a little bit earlier in the season as well. And maybe you can question Malachi Flynn. How is he still not getting up to the level where he can be in the daily rotation? So a lot of factors that go into that. But as far as the statement goes, like, we're talking about this playoff series where, you know, I admitted that they were better without Fred VanVleet due to his injuries, due to the bad matchups. But also, Game 6 was a game where we really could have used him, especially in the second half where the Sixers absolutely smothered us. They destroyed us. They basically said, if you're not going to hit a 3, then you're not going to score. The floor spacing was abysmal. There weren't many little pockets of space to operate our offense. So when the 3s weren't falling, the Sixers were just content to push that in transition and continue to dare us to hit 3s. The Raptors, as far as their 3-point threat goes, sure, we've got the catch and shoot guy in OG Anunoby who does pretty well with that, but pretty much it's Gary Trent Jr. and Fred VanVleet who offer us our floor spacing. So when one of them isn't there and the one who is there isn't shooting particularly well, you know, if Gary Trent's not shooting well and Fred VanVleet isn't even playing, there's going to be big problems. That is the 2 floor spacing guys for this team. We just don't have enough of that on the bench, which is another problem that needs to be addressed, as I said in the previous video. But it was very much lacking a player like Fred VanVleet for the Raptors. And also, even beyond just a 3-point shooting, point guards are very good at finding those little pockets of space to operate and finding those little pockets of space for other players to operate. I really loved how Fred VanVleet developed as a playmaker this season, like, well beyond just his scoring and his defense and how good they were. Like, Fred this season took a lot of strides as a playmaker, something that I may have doubted he could do going into the season. So that was great to see. And just the start of the season, just the difference the team displayed when he was on the court versus when he was off the court was remarkable. Like, he had to play in these minutes. He was so good for this team. He was a floor general. He was the best player on this team for a good long while. Like, this guy was an all-star. Are we forgetting that this guy was an all-star? So as far as the statement goes, this team is better without Fred VanVleet. It's just a ridiculous statement. I don't think it's the majority of Raptors fans who believe this, but there were a lot of people saying that, oh, Fred VanVleet playing like this, like it's time to move on from Fred VanVleet. Like, no, it's not. This guy was an all-star. He's on like a decently team-friendly contract. Like, he's making just over $20 million a year. Like, that's pretty good for the output that he displayed for most of the season. We just need to do a better job of managing his minutes. There's not a lot of players in the NBA, especially point guards, who travel so much on the court. They run so much. They cover so much ground in the court. And they play high octane on defense and on offense. Guys are doing this much. Like, Fred can't sustain 38.5 minutes per game. We gotta decrease that. Can we get him like 34 to 35 minutes per game so we can operate at a higher level in those minutes? I think that is absolutely something that can be achieved. But roster construction and making that better is going to be important for this season. I guess, to be fair, we weren't expecting to be this good and have to address all of these, little concerns this season, because we just weren't expecting to win 48 games. We weren't expecting to be the 5 seed. So maybe those things were a little bit neglected, and I can understand that. But bottom line from this, Fred VanVleet is a fantastic player who was recognized by NBA media as an all-star for a very good reason. He makes the Raptors better. When he is on the court, the Toronto Raptors are better. Are there specific matchups where he can struggle? Yes. But I think the biggest thing is that injuries affected him significantly. Because you go to some regular season games where Fred VanVleet was great against the Sixers. I would just say that it comes down to the injuries, it comes down to the workload, and it also comes down a little bit to Fred VanVleet not being able to hit his shot in the playoffs in such a small sample size. But ultimately, we've seen Fred do it in those big moments in the playoffs. This guy had a finals MVP vote when we won the championship. The Raptors are better with Fred. Fred is a big part of this team on and off the court. I don't think that we should be rushing into trading him, and I really just do not think that this team is better without Fred. And I think if you think that, that's just a ridiculous statement. Come on, guys. So what do you make of Fred VanVleet? Are the Raptors better without him? Do you think it's time to move on? I mean, I completely disagree, but would love to hear your thoughts and opinions if you disagree in the comments down below, because that is it for me for today. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really do appreciate it. Make sure to drop a like on the video if you did enjoy, and let's get to 200 likes in this video. It's something that we can definitely achieve here. We do it on plenty of other ones. Let's get to 200 on this one as well. And if you want the greatest coverage and analysis on the latest Toronto Raptors news, then you need to be subscribed to Amateur Hour Sports and help us on the road to 9,000 subs. Final thing, we have a Discord. Links in the description for that. Continue the conversation beyond these videos and join along and chat along with me in that Discord. See you again next time for another video.